The most pressing problem of the land of the free. Although the concept originated in Western Germany, Milton Friedman, or one of America's leading economic voices during the latter half of the 20th century, vouched for and pushed the neoliberal agenda in American societies. Friedman is infamous for suggesting that the only responsibility for a corporation is to increase its profits, no matter what the costs are. Neoliberalism is therefore more concerned with maximizing profits than the well-being of those under the economic system. It claims to promote the American dream of freedom, but through measures unconventional to human nature. Arising in response to civil unrest regarding the inequalities of legal land and property ownership, neoliberalism focuses on freedoms of privatizing and individualizing the market and its occupants to promote the American work ethic. Sure, the freedom to participate in the market for economic gain sounds like freedom, but does it necessarily grant all American citizens freedom? Well, not exactly. In fact, it breeds disproportionate amounts of inequality and competition due to that inequality. Looking back on our nostalgic elementary school days, we were socialized from the start into viewing neoliberal strategies as the only way to achieve the American dream. From our strict schedules mimicking 9-to-5s and after-school activities designed to instill accountability within us upon entering the labor force. But what use are neoliberal strategies to those who have been socially and institutionally distanced from appropriate resources in order to succeed? Neoliberalism, or capitalism if you will, sells its citizens a false sense of freedom by reducing government intervention and branding it as a non-totalitarian approach just because those with a history of surplus capital are able to now control their assets more freely. However, keep in mind that these businesses are doing whatever it takes to maximize their profits alone. Disregard the well-being of the ecosystem as big wig factories cloud the skies with a variety of greenhouse gases. You can also forget about the well-being of human nature, as the competitive culture of neoliberalism sparks a culture of competitive consumers. You see, the spirit of capitalism not only encourages people to compete with their gadgets and different fashion trends, but also encourages people to compete in the grand scheme of economic survival. In this economic climate, everyone is looking out for themselves in order to sustain themselves, which can explain the highly concentrated crime rates in increasingly marginalized communities. So, if neoliberalism offers a society the ultimate form of freedom, why do some people still feel the need to wreak havoc on their peers in order to climb the ladders of social and surplus capital? Why are institutions spending large amounts of money on criminalizing certain neighborhoods and persons by issuing citations and tickets just to further induce their economic burden? Surely these are not the actions or desired experiences of truly free human beings. It is all a very systematic approach in order to keep the poor poor and the rich rich. And if that is what constitutes freedom, hell, I want out. Even frontiers that aren't even micromanaged by multimillionaires are covered in pollution and harmful elements for the ecosystem. We have got to start asking why. If competition is at the forefront of the American subconscious mind, why are marginalized communities or subsidized public housing vicinities not concerned with the amount of pollution riddling the streets? Is this a result of the individual's lack of moral respect for the planet, or is it the result of them acting out of what is defined by them? By being sectioned off and labeled poor, lazy, and unworthy based on neoliberal society, surely one is to act as perceived in order to gain control of the narrative. When neoliberal competitors gentrify particular neighborhoods and neglect others, low-income housing blocks become riddled with drug and street crime offenses in order to gain control over one's own economic stability. But since the war on drugs began, it is becoming increasingly difficult to try to grab hold of that stability. Already stigmatized by the lack of resources to begin with, minorities restrained to these low-income communities are targeted by state officials for incarceration in terms of petty drug offenses. Is it out of a general concern for the individual's well-being, or is it simply a fear tactic to reduce competition between neoliberal dispensary owners? State-ordained social sanctions under this light look sort of hypocritical, wouldn't you agree? Why imprison millions of minorities for the sale or possession of such a scary drug just to turn around and build businesses exporting that same exact drug? So what do we do in these cases? Do we march along the streets demanding justice like our ancestors? Well, we have, time and time again. Each time the demand for justice by civil society becomes overwhelming, Neoliberalism must be bailed out by socialist incentives. But it isn't enough just to receive a few bucks in a stimulus package here and there in the face of a stagnant economy. Some have suggested a libertarian society in heap of all the injustice. Libertarians are keen on defending the natural autonomy of a human being and believe that people should ultimately have complete sovereignty over their lives. But critical race and feminist theorists do not believe that this goal is the end-all be-all. After all, we wouldn't want anyone free in espousing beliefs that cause detriment to society. So what I propose is a complete reconstruction of the human vernacular. The words that we use on a daily basis shape the reality in which we live. If our discourse is highly patriarchal, then so will our society be. We must sit and rethink our ideologies of freedom and come to a consensus that subjectively benefits humanity and the ecosystem conjunctively. But before we jump to redefining our reality, we must attempt to correct our mistakes. Indigenous Native Americans, Africans, Latinos, Latinas, Asians, Arabs, women, and those with disabilities should all be provided with some degree of reparation. There needs to be a complete leveling out of capital in order to start a society anew in light of a more just economy. And as for men, well, we'll just have to let them know that emotional vulnerability and compliance in a democracy is not an attack on their masculinity or their ability to reach self-actualization. Once again, redefining our reality, I believe, will reveal people's alienation in a neoliberal society and will thus encourage the return of the spirit of traditionalism or to humanity itself. Thank you.